Welcome, everybody. So today I'm happy to introduce Sam Calagione, who is back to visit us again for a second time here in New York. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, buddy. Thank you. I'm going to move around between the podium and this chair. I'm wearing a girdle, not just to emphasize my girlish curves, but I've got a ruptured disc in my back. So I'm going to kind of be moving back and forth and self-medicating a bit as we do this chat. I know I'm in a place with many with my brethren. When I walked in and I emailed Adam saying I'm definitely still coming. I got this little issue with my back. It's hard for me to stand for a while, and it was kind of like Goldilocks up there with like 4 different chairs. This one's too soft. This one's just right. So that one looks just right. And thank you for thinking about that, Adam. 3 members of the Google team that were responsible for Urkontinent are with us, Cameron, Keith, and Adam. And as questions come up that may be a little bit too technical on the Google side for me to address during the Q&A component of this very loose presentation, I'm welcoming them up to answer those questions as well. So very, very basically, I know a number of hands went up of folks that were here the last time I got to speak in front of in this room. So I'll do real brief who is Dogfish, our company, in the context of the craft brewing community and the beer industry at large. Then I'll jump into the Urkontinent project, and then I'll jump from that into the story around the other beer that we're serving besides Urkontinent tonight, which is our Positive Contact, and then also kind of weave in just the overall importance of collaboration in our industry, but more specifically in Dogfish Head's approach to business. All these projects are examples of collaboration. So starting with Dogfish, we are now 17 years young. We opened in 95. I think I was about 25 years old when we opened, and we were the smallest brewery in the country when we opened in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. I know there's a number of home brewers in this community, and I was basically just brewing beer on glorified homebrew equipment. I had an early 3-keg brewing system that we did some things to make it more volume friendly. But right from the get-go, when there was all the first sort of generation of craft brewers, some awesome ones, and they were brewing really flavorful, intensely flavorful beer in comparison to the largest breweries selling in this country, which intentionally made their beer more approachable. Some would say dumbed down, but very, very consistent, but very samey. Frankly, most of the largest breweries that sell beer in this country make some slight variation of the same style, a light lager. And the first generation of craft brewers came in and kind of re-embraced continental styles like pale ales from England or lagers from Germany. So knowing we were starting small, we said we're going to do something very different. We're going to try and embrace the entire culinary landscape for potential ingredients to brew with. And that's where that sort of motto of off-centered ales for off-centered people came from, was that philosophy of that kind of global approach to ingredients for brewing. And if you look back in the longest history of beer, the beer geeks in this room know the Reinheitsgebot, the Beer Purity Act of 1516. Bavarian government mandated beer could only be made with water, barley, and hops. Yeast wasn't included because it wasn't discovered by Louis Pasteur in its context of how it works in beer yet. And 90-something% of the beer sold globally today commercially roughly kind of is done in accordance to that Reinheitsgebot. I say roughly because the biggest breweries use a lot of corn and rice, cheaper adjuncts instead of all barley. But if you look back in the longer history of beer, 1516, human beings have been drinking beer for about 9,000 years. The first known, like by physical evidence, fermented cereal-based beverage, i.e. a beer, was discovered in the Jiahu dig site in China. We do that beer in collaboration with the molecular archaeologists that vetted that discovery, called Chateau Jiahu, and it's made with sake yeast, sake rice, hawthorn fruit. And so that is the longest history of brewing. So this concept of beer only being really 4 ingredients has only been with us about for 10% of our human brewing timeline in the history of civilization, and yet the recent generations just kind of assume that beer is beer. That kind of happened until the craft brewing renaissance in this country. The Europeans were a little bit better than we were at preserving these traditions of brewing very inspired, very flavorful beers that were outside of that light lager juggernaut style that dominates globally. But still, they were existing styles. And you look at these cultures, almost every culture around the world had its own indigenous beers. And of course, they predated the Reinheitsgebot. So they too kind of just embraced this idea of whatever could grow in their region of their world, whatever they could pick out of their terroir, their local ground, that's what they made beer with. And a project that we did, I don't know, now it's been, my son's 13, probably 9, 10 years ago, was when the first shock and awe bombing was happening. And I was watching a dinosaur video with my son to stop watching CNN and the other stuff that was dominating TV. And they showed a picture of, dinosaurs and da-da-da. And before continental drift, there was the one supercontinent, and that gave us the inspiration to do a beer called Pangea. And I was stuck in this pretty remote little area in Montana where we were on vacation with our family, and it wasn't like I could go to do much outside of ski, hang with my family. But really, once I watched that, I put my son to bed, and for the next 3 or 4 hours, I sat there using Google as a resource, and I decided, I want to do a beer with every continent included as an ingredient, and kind of our way of putting the fractured world, that shock and awe, bombing, messy world that we live in, back into one thing, sort of cohesive thing. And I did that without knowing that Antarctica was a continent. I wasn't a geography major. English major, not a geography major. So that presented some challenges as I did my Google searches for what we could include. Every other continent was fairly easy. But, literally within 4 or 5 hours that evening, sipping beers and looking out at the snow, we came up with this recipe. And by the next morning, I had emails back from, I had penguin shit or water to choose from in Antarctica. You'll be surprised which one we chose. No, I'm just kidding. But that night, searching those ingredients, that was obviously the real challenge. And through that search, I found a U.S. military base down there. And as I went further into their website world, I found like a contact me type thing. And by the next morning, there was a, hell yeah, we're all homebrewers down here because we can't get beer. We totally know Dogfish. If you send us some bottles of this, we'll take a picture of us on the actual South Pole drinking it. He's like, we got this awesome reverse osmosis machine. It turns icebergs into awesome water. We'll send you that. I was like, all right, I got my ingredient. And from Antarctica. So then we worked out the shipping issues, and because at first we're like, it's brewed with 100% Antarctica water. That's what I wrote that night. And by 2 days later, looking at UPS and da-da-da-da-da, we're like, and every bottle has a molecule of Antarctic water in it. And so we get 4 or 5 gallon buckets every year of the Antarctic water, and it has crystallized ginger from Australia, and all these different ingredients. And I've gotten to be friendly with Adam through the years, and got invited to speak here again a few years ago. And for small businesses, the idea for this Urkontinent, which is kind of a word that I think has more Germanic history in uses, but essentially also means Pangea, is I think an earlier word that predates it for what the supercontinent was called. And when Adam approached me about seeing if we had an opportunity to collaborate here, I thought the best way into this, because the moment that we're at in the brewing history of America, we now have more breweries in America than we had pre-Prohibition, back when every neighborhood had its own brewery. And it's impressive. The year 2012, there's now over 2,012 breweries in the country. Average American lives within 10 miles of a brewery. Amazing stats. But what's more incredible is we're on the cusp of another giant surge of brewery openings. So many of us, I'd say 98% of those of us that opened those 2,000 breweries started as home brewers and just turned our passion into our livelihood. While there's 2,000 breweries open right now, there's also 800 people that are registered in the startup phase of opening a brewery. So here we are as craft brewers with about 6 or 7% market share, and we're getting ready to have another 800 breweries open. But instead of like freaking out and the biggest craft breweries being like, oh, we got to do what we can to stop them, we kind of all come together as a community and do what we can to help them open, whether it's through our work as an association called the Brewers Association that represents the vast majority of small breweries in this country, or individually when a brewery like ours that might be mid-size reaches out to make a beer with a brewery like Shorts in Michigan or the Brewery in LA that are maybe less than 1/10 of our size, even though Dogfish is only 1/15 of 1% domestic market share. We are sizable and established now that we can use our outreach and our resources to engage with these smaller breweries. And we learn as much as they do when we do these projects. But knowing that we're at this moment of sort of an inflection point of an explosion of good beer, I thought it'd be really fun if we could do this project together in a way that lets us celebrate and do a sort of tutorial without it feeling teachy or preachy on all the ways that small companies can use not just Google, but technology that is accessible to grow. Because Dogfish, whether it was the Pangea project or today, we don't have focus groups, we don't have rooms full of MBAs. When we decide to do a project, we just decide to do it ourselves, and oftentimes that involves a lot of online research. And much like the internet in general has been a great leveler on the marketing side of beer, a brewery like Dogfish Head can have a social media world that's nearly as robust as the largest breweries. We're like, 20-something biggest brewery in the country. But my wife, Mariah, who runs all our social media, has done such a great job at that world that we have the presence of, I think, the 4th or 5th biggest American brewery online, whether it be gauge it by Facebook and Twitter or whatever she's doing that day. But the important thing is we recognize an obligation to share with the other small breweries that are just coming online or are smaller than us now the ways that you can be successful in business. And it's, again, not preachy because there's as many different approaches to opening and starting and brewing beer as there is great styles of beer that are out there. Beer's a subjective thing. We all have different palates, so there should be a limitless, landscape of different beers that are out there. But what is important is, like I said, collectively, all the small breweries are 7% market share. So we really need to stick together, and kind of a rising tide floats all ships as it gets more competitive in the beer market. A few weeks ago, Anheuser-Busch InBev reached out to purchase Modelo. It's still sort of pending a Department of Justice look at it, but for all intents and purposes, that most likely will happen. And so they'll go from having roughly a 47% market share to 53, overnight with one purchase. That's 6%, which is about the entire world of craft beer, all 2,000 of us. But that moment and that much market share shifted in the time it took for those two companies to sign contracts to merge. So God bless them. It's there's competitive components that I'm not going to go into here, other than to say our priority as small breweries is helping the other small breweries grow so that small breweries can still exist. So that's my little preaching here about what we wanted to do with this project. So then moving into the project itself, basically we try to make this as iterative and open as possible. And while the Pangea project was so much fun to do, that was just me in one room sitting there for 4 nights doing Google searches of ingredients that led to that beer and that recipe. This one, instead of a bunch of beer geeks from the Google and Dogfish side just sitting down saying, I like this, I like that, we said, well, why don't we try and make not just the reference point of Urkontinent is obviously a global reference point. Let's make the actual conceptualization of the beer as global as possible. So what I'll do is, since it's hard for me to talk in the actual what products we used or what kind of tools we used to do that. Let me just get that list out of the way, and then I can go back to speaking the way I do. A guy from our team, Trey, runs our IT department, and he was instrumental on our side in helping these things happen because I don't often speak the same language as my friends from Google that were on this project. So really just moving through the products that we used. And these guys can go further into how we use them as we do this. We used Google search, obviously, for ingredient research and searching the whole way. We use Google Docs for the online spreadsheets, documentation about the project. We used Moderator for the initial idea submissions, which I think was just a really cool component of this that I don't think's been done in the beer world before. And also for the voting and comments, the fact that you can submit something or not, but you can also just click onto if you like someone else's suggestion, and in that way it became this really democratic view of the ingredients and the process. We used Google Chat as we went through this process. We would meet up every month or so as we were bringing this towards a test batch, and then from the test batch towards the marketplace. We did Google Sites for the actual Urkontinent website, and we used Google Video. Some people submitted videos to go along with their ingredient submissions. We also set up our Google Plus business page. My wife did at some point during that process, and that's another important social media tool that we use. So what was really neat about this global component is you had this influx of over 100, I think, ingredient ideas that came into our world. And so you had the one component of how many people in the Google universe would have liked to seen that ingredient included in this beer. And then the other component of, oh shit, those things would taste horrible together. For some of the things, every single idea, if I could read you that list, it's like a free-form poem of awesome ideas for ingredients that don't usually go into beer. All 100 of them had their merits. Really, then our job became sort of curators of that recipe. The Google team sat down with the Dogfish team and this over 100 list of ingredients, and we started whittling it away for what things would work well together. So I forget, can you remember any of the really weird ones that we had to just throw out immediately?
Well, there was one
Keith?
that would cause poisonous.
Poisonous, yeah. We try to, certain hallucinogens and things that kill you were pretty easy for us to knock off of that list. So there were a few of those. That wasn't my weirdest ingredient moment. I was in Cairo a couple of years ago sourcing ingredients for a beer we do called Tahanket, based on ancient Egyptian beers. And I was at the marketplace, and I was horribly ineffective trying to use my Italian gesticulating to describe what I wanted and why, and they're just kind of raising up there. And then they're like, yeah, we made the agreement, and I'm walking away with deer penis as an ingredient because I was trying to get dates, and the words were very similar. Dom fruit, which is a palm fruit, and then I'm walking away. I'm like, that's really neat. We're going to be able to use these dates. And the one thing I caught in translation earlier was that this ingredient would also be very good for my sex life. And I guess that's what the deer penis does. So that's a bad digression. But let's get back to Urkontinent. Know that we never use that ingredient in any of our beers. Oh, the ingredients are up there. The list is up there. So that's an example of the page. Is that also the actual ones that we chose, Cameron, or is that an earlier version?
That's the full list. Some of them are.
Okay, cool. So if you kind of you get the idea of the range of and then to the left is where people are saying, right, whether they like that idea, and then we tally that as well, and that went into our decision process. And what was also neat is from around the world, some of the ingredients were chosen 2, 3, or 4 times that were submitted. I think rooibos, right, was one of the ones that came to us We're still in the process of getting the cases of beer. If you were part of the Google community and your idea got chosen, we sent you, or in the process, some people already got theirs, of a case of the Urkontinent as for having the ingredient that was chosen. We had to narrow honey down a little bit further because there were different kinds of honey. That was one that had multiple entries. But the other part of this is how much of the editing process informed, what ended up being the recipe, especially the things that we chose not to consider. Because then really Dogfish had value in this beyond just the ingredients that we chose. It allowed us to get this global sourcing of over 100 ingredients and some theories behind why they might be good in beer. And believe me, we've kept that list and we refer to it and think about it as part of our process of coming up with additional recipes. And really that's part of what we, as small business people, how we use Google as well, is particularly in an industry. If you're a small business person, it means that you're most likely in an industry where you're in a niche. You're not going to be able to compete on scale or on volume with the biggest players in your industry, regardless of what they are. So in order to stand out in an industry where you're tiny, you have to do something really different. So I know other brewers like myself use Google search to do that first phase of vetting an idea, a creative idea, because you can go there and say, oh, I got this awesome idea for a beer with blah, 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 and you can do a quickly search, beer with blah, 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 and if it's already been done, it's probably not a good choice to try and stand out in the world by doing that. Or beer names. You might not have an IP lawyer on your staff at a 3-person nano brewery. But you can come up, you can say, hold on a second, I'm going to call my brewing company blah, blah, blah. That's the name. And you type in blah, blah, blah brewing company, and before you have to go through all that official research to get in use or trademarks and all that stuff, you can quickly, without lawyers, kind of parse down or work through those options. So I know that's something that we all do pretty regularly as small businesses. So at any rate, there's some great ideas for recipes, for ingredients that came out of that. But back to our process was the hard decisions of editing that and curating that list, which we did together over some of the video conferencings that we did. And then these guys came down to Rehoboth, and we brewed the test batch together. I don't remember what month that was. August. So that was kind of nice to have. When we were down there, we also took a lot of video. I think, Cameron, you were wearing the crazy GoPro head thing. So there's some neat shots in the video that we did together that are super, kind of indie movie, jumping all over the place type stuff. And then we did some more formalized editing stuff that became part of that film. And then after the test batch, we sent samples, I think, or we discussed that. And you guys, some of you came back down, didn't you, when it came on tap? Or did any of you come down in between? No? Mike, maybe? I don't know. Yeah. So the next process was actually the sensory component, not just did they all sound nice on a page and we thought they could work together, but how they would work together. So that's why we do these smaller test batches. And again, not using focus groups. What we have, and we were talking about, you guys call it dog fooding, an idea of kicking it around and making sure, at least internally, that these are going to be, your coworkers are also the best and most critical judges that you could have. And we kind of do the same thing at our pub, where we always do a test batch before we bring a beer to market, at least one, sometimes two. And I talked to my buddies at a chicken company much bigger than us that also is kind of near us, and they were saying, wow, that's so lucky that you get people that pay for your R&D batches, They have focus groups where people are paid to go try their new ideas for chicken. And they were frankly like, yes, there's some good data that comes through that process, but let's face it, someone's in a room getting paid to eat some chicken. They're like, that's good. I like that one. That's good. You're getting paid to do that. You kind of reverse that idea, and you got hardcore beer geeks coming to our pub in Rehoboth, and now we get over 1,000 visitors to our production brewery every week. These people make a pilgrimage from Ohio or Kentucky or there were some from Brazil there 3 days ago because they were showing the Brewmasters show down there, and they decided that's what they wanted to do with their week's vacation. If these people are going to come that far to the brewery, and of course they're going to say, since Dogfish kind of has a reputation for experimentation, of course when they get to the source, they're going to say, what's new? What haven't I tried? What's just being brewed in your pub right now? So then these people drove from Brazil, and I don't know what the currency is there, but they put out their money on the table, let's say about $6, and we give them a beer. They're going to tell us if it sucked. It's not like we're paying them to give us an opinion. That process of actually expecting people to pay for even your R&D batches is wonderful in terms of getting you very real feedback. So there were some tweaks that we made to the test batch. I forget which spice it was that we decided was not coming through as much, and we upped.
It was in the video. We did it in real time.
Oh, okay. As we made that call, was that based on the teas, the water teas that we made?
I think it was a mistake that we made.
Shh, Adam, we're filming here. That creative decision that we made to go in a different direction.
I think you referred to it as an audible.
We called an audible. Which is, yeah, and so, but really, I think actually what we wanted to pull up forward was the wattle seed, which comes from Australia, which we to get it here was not easy because it hadn't been acknowledged in a beer ingredient before. So that process of submitting that label to the TTB, the federal arm that regulates us, it involves an SOP, a statement of process, and there wasn't really a history of wattle seed. And then finding a wattle seed producer that could get us this much in this volume. The first guys we called in Australia, he's like, "Oh yeah, mate, I got 2 of the plants in my backyard." We're like, "We're making 4,000 cases of this beer. You got a bunch of neighbors with two plants each, like 400 neighbors or so." So it led to us working with the consortium of wattle seed raising type people. And we had to overbuy. We had to commit to a certain volume, which led to some really good wattle seed ice cream at our pub. You had wattle seed salad special. We're tired of wattle seed on its own. We like it in Urkontinent though. But at any rate, it's what contributes the almost dirt. It doesn't sound good as a beer descriptor, but there's a very earthy, dirt-like note to this beer that we think is really unique in beer. And the roasty, dark grains that give this the color in comparison to, say, Positive Contact really complemented those earthy notes that came from the wattle seed. It was also a heroic effort done by the Google team to get what I think was like, 3/5 of the Mountain View's honey supply that the chef keeps up on the roof up there. But he was excited to be part of this project as well. So that was another oh shit moment of ingredients to say, will we really be able to get? So it's pretty ironic that we have ingredients from around the world, and our anxiety was mostly around the honey that was coming because we wanted to make sure we used Google's honey, as that's how we promoted it. So at any rate, there wasn't one Urkontinent advertisement. We didn't pay, in any traditional extent for any of the marketing of Urkontinent. We served it at the GABF, the Great American Beer Festival, which is the largest single beer event in the country put on by the Brewers Association. I took a couple sixtels to a couple special events that I knew would be high impact, whether even it was just 60 of us beer geeks in a room. I knew it would have resonate online. And then the internal chatter of those folks that won and the true champions on the team getting the word out about it. And of course, the film that we made together. So really that film was the centerpiece of sort of our marketing, bringing this beer to market plan. And so really it was just timed where folks from the Google side shared the word at the same moment that Mariah, my wife, kind of blasted it out through our social media. As Adam mentioned, there was some anxiety caused by that because, of course, the idea of is it Google Brewing Company? And I've Googled that. Someone's already got that. You can't use that name. But there was some concern because obviously Dogfish was making the beer all ourselves as as professional brewers, and we understood that the liability was there. My hat's off to Google that they still allowed this film to go out there, and it's one of the most viewed YouTube videos that Dogfish has ever made. So that in itself meant that by the time the orders of this beer shipped, they were already 100% sold out. When it came off the packaging line, the demand from the distributors was such that we probably could have made twice as much and still immediately sold it out before it actually got to retail. So a wonderful challenge, but intentionally so, and Dogfish does this all the time. We don't want to be just 60 Minute Brewing Company, our flagship beer. We're probably the only sizable top 20 craft brewery that high-fives each other when the percentage of our revenue based on our best-selling beer goes down in a year. We're like, we got it down to 47%. You know, you'd get fired if you ran a public company for making these kinds of decisions, I'm sure. But again, if we really believe in off-center ales for off-center people as a concept, then we need to practice what we preach. And so our goal is always to put as much efforts and energy into one-off, single time a year release beers like Urkontinent and Positive Contact as we put behind 60 Minute. And so that process allows us to have 35 beers that we package every year, compared to maybe the norm of a little less than half that for most brewers. But these beers act as a de facto marketing or sales team, because there's always something to talk about. If you're at a retail place and someone says, hey, what's new from Dogfish? We try to make sure that every month, and maybe 2 or 3 times a month, there's something coming up that's a limited release, and we intentionally gauge our volume to make sure that demand is higher than supply, so that these experiments continue to be exciting for beer lovers who really want to kind of come on this journey with us and explore the outer edges of what beer can be. So the gang will take questions when we get to the Q&A part, but I should probably move on. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Does anyone have a question while I have a few ounces of beer? Go ahead, no? You want to wait till the end?
What's your favorite Dogfish brew?
It's usually the one I'm drinking when I'm asked that question. I probably, by volume, drink mostly Indian Brown, 60 Minute, Hellhound, our IPA. In the summer, I drink a whole lot of our Festina Pesh, which is a tart light 4.5 ABV beer. Namaste, which is like a Belgian white we do with lemongrass. By volume, those. And then every week, if something new comes off our packaging line, I bring home either a 750 or a six pack. Or if it's a one-off that we do every year, I still bring that home to see if it's evolving. And I have a nice little library at home and at the brewery of everything that we've brewed to compare it against. So it's a fun job. So I'll move on to Positive Contact, and I guess in between them, I'll talk about that approach to collaboration for us. And again, that I mentioned it earlier when I said collectively the small breweries have less than 7% market share. So we recognize the rising tide floats all ships component of our niche of the beer industry, but collaboration in Dogfish is even more central to our approach. We think that there's a lot of good karma that comes with prioritizing collaboration instead of competition, and we catch ourselves in moments at meetings talking about competitive subjects, and we consciously try to stop ourselves and bring our discussion back to what we can do that's positive. So one of the most positive things we think we can do is work with other companies that we believe in, and regardless of scale. And sometimes we take shit for that. When we do a beer called Theobroma, an ancient recipe, we use a tiny company called Askinosie Chocolate in St. Louis, and we got to tell that story and share the word on Askinosie and bring some attention to them through what we did, and they shared the word and kind of got their chocolate and our peanut butter, but our peanut butter's beer, and it was kind of a 1 + 1 = 3, as it is with any collaboration, because you're accessing the group of people that love one company and turning them on to the other company. So it kind of allows both those companies' awareness to grow exponentially when these new demographics demographics or groups of people are suddenly turned on to something that they didn't know about. And so, Askinosie is a no-brainer, tiny little artisanal company. But when we do a beer with Sony Music, Miles Davis Bitches Brew, we took some flack for that from a few fellow beer geeks online, saying, "Oh, you're working with Sony. That'd be like if you're working with Budweiser." And our theory there is, yeah, okay, but we love Miles Davis as an artist, and he's kind of, frankly, a little bit marginalized compared to maybe where he was in recognition for really exploring that fusion jazz rock world that a lot of bands play in today. This is a nice opportunity for us to celebrate that and kind of maybe bring Miles Davis to a bunch of hardcore beer geeks in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s that might not have been as familiar with his work. So we make sure the opportunity to collaborate makes sense. And we've said no. There was a big ass mustard company that wanted to do a co-branded thing with us. And we just basically said, okay, and we're going to do this, this, and this. And they're like, oh no, we'll use our own a beer that we make here in this Dogfish co-branded thing, just because of the way we produce. And that was a very short conversation because there was nothing authentic about that process. And then compare that to recently, we talked to two different companies. I was eating pickles one night and had with my 60-minute IPA. And I was like, dang, these go really well together. And and they were from Brooklyn Brine, a small company here, and that led me to explore an opportunity to work with Seamus and the gang at Brooklyn. And meanwhile, there's at least one big cucumber / pickle company with big locations in Delaware. We thought about that for a moment, but that one didn't seem like the right fit. If they were big and local and locally owned and way into the local Delmarva Peninsula's community, the scale wouldn't have mattered. But the feeling that there was nothing that we felt warm about, and my HR director was the one who was like, this one doesn't feel right. And that's kind of how we make these decisions. And our process at Dogfish is really democratic. We have basically 7 people that I sit with. I'm the president, my wife Mariah's the boss, the vice president. Nick is our chief operating officer, and then VP of sales, brewing operations director, and brewmaster and the HR director. We all 7 sit at a table. And a few years ago, they were like, Sam, we are all in. We don't want to work anywhere else. The one thing that we would like, though, is a little more input on the what we're doing next stuff. That still we know what you're good at and what you love, but for us to feel 100% all in at the executive level of running this company, can you kind of run these ideas by us before you tell us this is what we're doing next week? And so that was probably in 17 years, kind of the biggest moment of humility for me, because I already kind of felt this is starting to feel like a self-help thing over here. I should lay down. But I should sit in the chair. But for me, what I recognize, the kind of an existential moment, is I'd done a pretty good job of hiring people whose skills complement my own. And that's what was really hard as a small business. Startups all about it. We don't have cash. We need money. We got to survival mode. And then as you grow, the challenges become more about people and finding the right people to fit culturally and finding the right people with the skill set to match your own as you try and grow this company. And I'd done a pretty good job of that so that I could just focus on what I'm good at, which is a new beer recipe, a new idea for an event, a new idea for a collaboration or a project. So I took great pride in saying, I've got this part of the company, but then you also have to realize that that's kind of one of the fun parts of working at a small business and being at the executive level, is being involved in these giant risk decisions to do something they haven't done before. So it was a real challenge for me to listen to them and say, okay. And now it's turned into this big dysfunctional sort of Italian family approach to strategy, where it's like, and I basically have to whine and cry. I don't cry, but I whine. I don't yell. wine, and like I walk up and down the room, and the cliche is I rarely say I'm going to put my president's hat on for this one, and it got bad if that happened, and I rarely do it because I know if I don't have all of them on board and wanting to push me in the same direction, the project's going to have a less likely chance of succeeding. So the real goal is convincing all the 6 of them to want to do what I want to do. And then a lot of times that leads to us altering that idea. When I did the pickle collaboration with Seamus in Brooklyn, my instinct was, I really like this guy. Let's just trust him. We don't need a contract. And Nick, our COO, is like, I like him too. I want to do this project. We need a contract. And so that's an example of that process. So it's really also an example of collaboration, not just outside with companies, but collaboration internally within our company, and how the 7 of us try to work together to move Dogfish Head in the right direction. So I learn from them every day. So the project behind you is one that was pretty unified. Yes, that they were behind doing it because it's not a giant label band, and because the idea I had to bring food into it hadn't been done before, and they really loved that idea. So basically, this beer, Positive Contact, came from Dan the Automator, the musician he's in Gorillaz and Deltron 3030s, the band this one that came about from. And basically, this album was a pivotal album for me when it came out 11 years ago, or whatever it was. I just loved it because it was so distinct in the world of hip hop. Because again, it had a lot of that jazz and orchestration components, very like grand music for the world of hip hop. And Del's like Del the Funky Homo Sapien is also in this band, an amazing rapper. So I got the call from Dan. And I was just walking around a conference room on the phone with Dan the Automator, and I'm like, yeah. And so he told me, he's like, I'm a big Miles fan. He named his son Miles. And he's like, I love what you guys did with that. And Robert Johnson, we did a beer with, and he was a big fan of. He's like, let's do something. And so as we walked into that, he wasn't a huge beer geek. He was more of a foodie. And so he's like, so basically I sent him every beer we make. It was about $400 worth of beer, I think 40 different beers from different vintages, and it was more in shipping than just the beer because I want to make sure it got there in really good shape. So I overnighted it from Delaware to his home in San Francisco, like $600. I don't remember what it was to ship it. It was a lot. Shipping it overnight was not an idea I brought in front of the 7 people that I work with. I don't think it would have gone well. I would have had to put on my president hat. So at any rate, he was awesome about it. The idea was I asked that he drink each beer and then send me a little diary entry on his impressions of that beer. And it was also a canary in the coal mine to see if this is a project that he would take seriously, because I know he's a very well-regarded musician and probably gets pulled in a million directions. So this is a way to see if he was really engaged, and it would be really an authentic, equal sort of collaboration the way it was when we did Urkontinent with the folks at Google. And it was neat. Every single day, he wouldn't necessarily finish them all because it'd be a big champagne bottle, and he'd say, I had 4 or 5 ounces of this. This is what I like. This is what I didn't. And then I asked for him to just do a free-form list your favorite culinary ingredients. And then I met him here in New York City at Brewery, the brew pub that Dogfish and 2 Italian breweries do the brewing. We're the brewing sort of collaborators on Brewery project. We just opened another one in Rome within the Italy stores here and in Rome. And so I met Dan the Automator up on the roof. I brought a bunch of the ingredients that I thought from his list would work well in a beer. I had cheese graters and tea steepers and paring knives, and we just sat there, and I took the base beer of his 4 favorite beers of the 40 that we use, and we just sat there and put the different ingredients in those 4 beers. The alcohol acts as a solvent, strips kind of the flavors and oils out of that ingredient, and gives you a rough idea of how it'll contribute to that beer. So from that, we were able to kind of do what our process was and figure out what ingredients worked well together. And really, Fuji apples, cilantro, and cayenne pepper actually proved to go really well together. And we've never commercially done anything that's cider-esque, and to do this beer with a very high percentage of apple, making it a hybrid between the worlds of a cider and a beer was something new and exciting for us. So again, an opportunity to learn from our collaborator of something that we might not have known ourselves. So then the idea was, You're a foodie. How about this? We'll do, if you come up with 4 original sort of dub versions of the songs on the next album, let's for now put them on CD. We'll do the test batch at the pub. We'll send out bottles of the test batch to our favorite chefs. You pick a few and I'll pick a few with the music, and we'll ask them to put the music on, drink one of the bottles, and then think about the other, the beer and the music and what food would go well with that. So we chose 5 chefs from Mario Batali to David Chang and some great chefs, and they all again were all in on the project and sent us their notes and their thoughts. And we asked to do a recipe for 6 people, because the idea was we wanted to sell this as a box set like you would with music, but our box set came with 6 beers, a vinyl album. On the sleeve of the album was the recipes for 6 people from the 5 chefs. And you can imagine the dozens, now hundreds of hours that my coworkers and I had to spend putting a vinyl record into a 6-pack, hand taping it with duct tape that we wrote the positive contact on the duct tape. We sent out 4 cases around the country on pallets randomly to test that vinyl would last if it made a trip to Arizona and back. Again, a shipping decision that I did not vet through the 7 of us, and it worked. And then we even policed through social media what happened once that beer was released in the marketplace, meaning it had 1 UPC code on it. Our intention was to be one product, but some retailers were a little less than ethical and chose to open that bottle up, open that case up, sell them individually, which means those people would not get the album, would not get the opportunity to do that among their friends. So what was so awesome about, again, harnessing that world of social media as a small company is Mariah sat there for days after that release and watched beer lovers narc on the retailers that did this. And then all we can do, because it would be price fixing if we called them up and said, you can't do that, you assholes. We can't do that because it would be price fixing. So our message was, we'll be very disappointed in any retailer that decided to do this, and we hope you guys as beer lovers will voice your disappointment as well. And other than like a couple regions of the country, most people were pretty good about respecting that decision to keep that as one whole beer. Now, will we ever do that again and go through that bottling and putting an album in? Perhaps not, but but our commitment, we have off-center ales for off-center people and analog beer for the digital age, and those are sort of our 2 rallying cries. And we will continue to do projects with the vinyl and with other musicians we love. So I think I'm pretty close to the Q&A part of the presentation, and I'd rather let's just open it up. If you guys have any questions, it'll also give me an opportunity to have another sip of beer.
So the Google collaboration beer seems to be sold out everywhere, hard to get. Are there any plans to increase production and get this into the hands of the people looking for it?
We would love to. From what I understand, Keith is mostly responsible for that. I don't know from here how he's buying them in Kentucky, but that's pretty cool. Again, this is one that we love keeping demand in front of supply, but we realized the challenge when a lot of folks from within the Google community couldn't get access to this as well. We tried to send out to what areas, we tried to send more to New York. We intentionally found retailers around your California location and asked them to stock up. But it's a real challenge because, again, at retail, we have to make the beer available to everybody. That's also federally mandated. It's barely answering your question. The better answer would be, we'd love to do this beer again someday, and I don't know when that day will come.
Dogfish Head has like a really distinctive look and branding. Do you guys have an in-house designer that makes all your labels?
It used to be me, and then 2 years ago we hired our first graphic design guy, and I loved that job. And it was kind of like, and I painted the Urkontinent typeface, and then brought that word in all the different fonts, kind of representing all the different folks that each letter's from a different font, and then I brought that to our graphic designer, and from that, using that color scheme, the label developed. So I still love staying very involved in that. I came up with our sort of ransom letter type font called Doggy, which was basically a 19th century stamp set that I just cut and paste and scanned in to create a font. And then I came up with our logo and that outer broken edge, kind of, trying to talk about the kind of looking kind of rustic. So I still love being involved in that art project. Our challenge at our company is you don't want just the art on the label to be perceived as the art of what we do. So we kind of need to recognize that every different department contributes towards that perception of how unique our brand is. So we don't really put on a pedestal the brewers or the guys that do the art. Everyone's kind of helping to get that beer to market. So yeah, I don't know if that answered it, but
No, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm a few drinks in, so forgive me if this comes out slurry. You talked a lot about the different ingredients you use at Dogfish. Can you talk a little bit about the different ways you make beer? I'm thinking specifically about cask aging or whiskey casks that are really popular right
Yeah.
now, and some of the ways you're thinking about expanding that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the vast majority of the commercial brewing equipment is stainless steel because it's sterile and easy to clean, very durable. But long before stainless steel, there were lots of other materials used in the world of brewing. We have the largest wooden brewing vessels built in America since before Prohibition. We're adding another Palo Santo wood, which is a Paraguayan dark wood, 10,000 gallon wooden brewing vessels. But we are playing around outside of that. We just did an ancient ale with our Italian, the two breweries that we do Italy with, and we went to ruins, Etruscan ruins outside of Rome, and we looked at those tombs and the materials that were either written about coming from that culture or actually still had evidence of the tombs were bronze, wood, and terracotta. And so our three breweries are doing the exact same recipe, but fermenting the beer with different materials. So Baladan's doing their fermentation on wood. We're using bronze in our fermenters. And then Birra del Borgo just built these beautiful, huge terracotta fermenters. So in a way that you got to look at the whole culinary landscape for ingredients, we need to also kind of be looking at every potential surface to use for beer as well.
How did a guy from Delaware get involved in Italy?
Okay. Yeah.
You seem the only non-Italian
part of
company
this?
down there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that basically that relationship didn't start with like Mario Batali or what was happening here. It started with Salone de Gusto, which is the biannual slow food conference that happens in Turin, which is the birthplace of that movement. That movement, slow food, was kind of in response to them trying to put a McDonald's in downtown Rome, and the Italians rioted, which is pretty cool. So it kind of birthed the modern era of sort of the locavore thing, or at least the earlier modern version. I mean, again, craft brewers were brewing beer with whatever is indigenous and local 10,000 years ago. So locavore wasn't invented by a fucking hipster in Brooklyn 3 years ago. It's been going on for 10,000 years. So I was invited to speak at the Salone de Gusto maybe every other year for maybe the last 7 or 8 years. And there's an awesome Italian craft beer pavilion over there. And I, of course, would have some beers with these guys and just realized that they were, brothers in arms and very creative and using tobacco and rare grains and tree resins in their beer. And so I really hit it off with two of them. And then those are two brewers that are involved in Italy, the retail company that's owned by a family over in Italy. And when Italy, as a family, that started to decide to open one in New York as their first American Italy, they said, we love these Italian brewers. We love, we get along really well with Sam, even the owners of Italy I hung out with over there. They're like, how about you three open a brewery in this Italy instead of just having a real good craft beer program. So then, and Mario Batali and Joe Bastianich were their American partners. So that's when I got to know them. But it mostly started with a relationship with the Italy family owners and those two Italian brewers. And the one we opened in Rome, I think it's the biggest single retail location in the world. The store in Rome just took over a giant train station, and we have a similarly sized brewery in the one there. I really kind of helped, I kind of oversaw the installation and vetting the brewing equipment decisions here, since I'm a lot closer, and they're doing that for Rome. It's a fun project. Question here.
So what % of beer batches would you say don't make it past the testing phase at the brew pub?
Let's see. We always have a program where we're just kind of throwing stuff against the walls to see what works without a goal of considering it for potential wide distribution. Those are just like fun, creative, flex your muscles, get input from other brewers, and make sure there's always fun small batches that we only do at the pub. So a lot of them that we do at the pub are never brewed with the intention of national distribution. They're one-off, just fun. But usually it is, I usually work on what I think would work well to come to market, and there's usually 2 or 3 test batches. We did, but they don't, and sometimes they don't work. I tell a story often about one we did with wheat and lavender and peppercorns, and there was way too much lavender, and the first comment card from someone that bought it came back and said it tastes like tongue-kissing Laura Ashley. So there's another one where we did a beer called Immort Ale, 11% alcohol, and aged on wood. And the first comment, this is in '96, we were doing wood age, peat smoked barley beers, and some of them were maybe ahead of their time, and some of them just sucked. We're doing one right now that I don't think it's on tap right now yet, but it's called Hot Thoop. THOUP exclamation point, and I got the idea from it when my nephew, who was only like 3, my sister was they were getting a Labrador Retriever dog, and they asked the kids what they wanted to name the dog. They decided another name, but the 3-year-old kept saying Hot Thoop, Hot Thoop, and they're like, well, it's not time to eat. He's like, no, doggy, Hot Thoop. So I was like, I laughed at that, and I'm like, wait a second, So we did a beer with carrots and ginger that we think would be really good soup. Obviously used a lot in soup recipes, but we got the fermentables from carrot juice, pure unpasteurized carrot juice, and the beer has an awesome orange hue to it. Whether a beer called Hot Thoop made with carrots is going to sell, I don't know. The brewers aren't psyched about it. They don't want to see us do thousands of batches of Hot Thoop beer. But that's one that I hope people like.
So what actually is it about the really large mass market beers that makes them taste so bad? Why is it, what practical part of the brewing process is it that is difficult to scale up? Because everyone seems to agree that the small microbreweries, craft breweries have much better beer.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the biggest breweries make some of the most consistent quality, consistent oriented beers in the world. That's how they got to be the biggest breweries. And I'm a beer geek, and I'm not a beer snob. I might not buy the beer from a giant brewery, but after mowing the lawn or after a hockey game, I love an ice cold can of Labatt's, and I'll drink pretty much any beer that's in someone's fridge if I'm having beers that night and I'm at their house. But the perception that the larger a brewery gets, the less good their beer is a real challenge, because even a brewery of Dogfish's size has giant tanks, relatively big tanks outside, and we look to the local community like a big brewery. And there's other much smaller breweries within 100 miles of us. But the danger becomes if you go to the hardcore beer geek websites, there's some unfortunate correlation between the scale of a craft brewery and their perception online. It's kind of that phenomena of no one eats at that restaurant anymore, it's too crowded, where there's a reason that restaurant's crowded, and it's because a lot of people like it. And just because an early adapter can't get in the door anymore of that restaurant doesn't make that a bad restaurant. But there is sort of a minority voice of hardcore beer geeks that are always, we are also always excited for what's new, but to be excited for what's new while still championing the breweries that trailblazed on doing really exciting stuff is really important for our community to stay healthy. And I'm sure you guys face this in the tech world too. If it's ubiquitous and everywhere, it's suddenly less cool. But ubiquitous and everywhere in our industry, again, we're 1/15 of 1% market share, and we get some of that backlash. So, scale shouldn't play into it.
But are there actual problems in the brewing process to make it bigger? Like, do you guys taste a little bit of it and adjust things along the way, things you just couldn't do if you
scaling our batches, you mean? I answered that question totally wrong, but I'm glad I shared that stuff. We intentionally go. We training wheel our beers, dog food them at our pub in a 5-barrel 10 keg batch test that. We have a 10-gallon batch that we can even test further just when we're trying to tweak one recipe in there, but we don't want to do a bigger scale thing. We do a little tiny one. And then we jump up to the 100-barrel brew house. And now we're building a 200 next to the 100. So we've got a nice, litany of brew houses of different scales to play around with those recipes. And yes, it's not, brewing recipes are not just proportionally extrapolated up. You still tweak hops and barley and different things in different scale batches. It doesn't all just go up equally, when you scale a recipe.
A lot of us here are engineers, so we're very concerned about efficiency. So what's the highest alcohol percentage beers that you've
Front
made
part of your question, I didn't know it was going in that direction.
and that you've ever made?
Right. We had a fun back and forth in the late 90s, early 2000s, I guess, where we were in coastal Delaware, and it's pretty quiet. In that era, demand for our beer isn't what it is now. So we spent a lot of time working on how we can make beer stronger. By just learning, we used it as let's learn about yeast and why aren't. So we made a beer that was 18%, and that became the strongest beer in the world. It was triple bock from Boston Beer. Before that, we came up with Worldwide. Then they came up with Millennium, and then we came out with I don't know what, but we got out of the arms race. And we're still very proud of our stronger beers for really, holding all the details. I brought Adam a 7-year-old bottle of our Worldwide Stout. And beers that are over 9% alcohol, the most important thing to say is these aren't meant to be like, oh, it's strong, I'm going to drink way too much of it really fast. Look at me. And that happens on YouTube. You occasionally see a person. And it makes me cringe. Nothing makes me cringe more because these beers, a light lager or a light wheat beer, light wheat ale takes about 10, 12 days to brew. This beer doesn't even go into the bottle until it's about 2 months. So as an engineer, you'll appreciate this lack of efficiency where we're tying up a tank that could have been turned over, 8 times to make something like this. And then we put it on a shelf, and now it's 7 years old before it was open to share it with a friend. So these beers are meant to be sipped and savored, and so I think we do more volume of beers and more styles of beer over, say, 11% alcohol than any brewery in the country between 120-minute, Worldwide, Fort, old school barley wine. So we're very considerate of that yeast process, and I think we're still at the point where our quality control department is larger in people than our sales, our in the field salespeople. And then last question here.
Musicians can be very influenced by other musicians.
Yeah.
How much would you say you're influenced by other breweries and what other people are doing versus just stuff you're coming up with purely on your own?
I'm definitely spurred on by the passion of other brewers, and I'm really proud of the collaborations that we've done with the brewers that we've done. That Beer Extreme Brewing that some of you got tonight has, recipes from all kinds of amazing breweries, from Allagash to the Brewery, from Shorts to Portsmouth Brewing. So many breweries excite me and inspire me, but what I really try not to do is take what they're doing and somehow absorb it into something that we're going to do. So we only advertise in Beer Geek publications, and frankly, I never read them. If they're doing an interview, I'm really proud to be part of it because I'm doing it to support the industry that supports us. But I also really don't want to be influenced by what else is already happening because our approach at Dogfish is really there's no use in doing what's already been done. So in the case of, Sam, you're a hypocrite, the volume of what you sell, your biggest selling beer is an IPA that's an established style. And that might be fair, but we came up with a very unique hopping approach where instead of just 1 or 2 or 3 big additions, we dose continually for 60 minutes in small volumes equally or 90 minutes or whatever. So that was our way into an existing style that allowed us to still approach it, from an off-centered perspective and kind of put our little thumbprint on at least what we do. So I really love seeing the breweries that are going for it. Probably my favorites are just the other ones like us that are brewing outside the Reinheitsgebot box type thing. So I won't say the names, but that's kind of the ones that I'm psyched for. And then, of course, the first generation brewers like Ken Grossman from Sierra Nevada, who I kind of recognize as the real patriarch of our movement. Anchor Brewery was a little bit earlier and deserved mad props, but that was taking over an existing but ailing regional brewery that never went out of business. Ken Grossman's the first guy that kind of was a bike repairman, sat down with a drill, built his own mash tun, started in a room this big. So for me, that was really the starting point of our movement.
Thank you very much.
This has been fun. I've learned a lot. I should sit now.
Thank you so much, Sam. We
Adam,
appreciate
this
it.
is great. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Cameron. You forgot your beer.